Dr. Aleksandar Kovic had been with the Foundation's ethics committee for 17 years when he received the assignment that would change everything. The email arrived at 3:47 on a Tuesday morning, marked with the crimson priority flag reserved for immediate deployment. He read it twice in the darkness of his quarters, the blue light from his tablet casting shadows across his weathered face. SCP-3654 had manifested. He had been selected as primary observer. The briefing materials were minimal, almost suspiciously so. SCP-3654 was classified as Euclid, though the containment procedures were unlike anything Kovic had encountered in nearly 2 decades of service. The anomaly could not be contained in any traditional sense because it appeared spontaneously to a single individual at unpredictable intervals, creating what field agents described as a museological manifestation event. Previous observers had reported entering pristine gallery spaces filled with exhibits pertaining exclusively to their own lives, or rather to lives they might have lived. Alternate timelines, divergent possibilities, the roads not taken, crystallized into marble and glass. Kovic dressed in silence, his hands steady despite the flutter of unease in his chest. He had reviewed ethics committee recommendations on hundreds of anomalies, had authorized containment procedures for entities that defied comprehension, had signed off on protocols that kept reality from unraveling at the seams. He had thought himself beyond surprise, beyond fear. The cold water he splashed on his face in the bathroom mirror did nothing to dispel the strange anticipation building in his bones. The manifestation point was a condemned office building in Prague's Smíchov district. Its coordinates delivered via encrypted message just 20 minutes before his arrival. A Foundation tactical team had already established a perimeter, their black vehicles forming a loose barrier around the structure's crumbling facade. Agent Reyes met him at the entrance, her expression professionally neutral. "Dr. Kovic," she said, offering him a tablet with the preliminary scan results. The anomaly presented at 0332 local time. Thermal imaging shows a stable interior space, approximately 8,000 square meters, though external measurements indicate the building should contain no more than 3,000. No other life signs detected inside. Kovic studied the data, noting the temperature differential, the electromagnetic readings that spiked and flattened in rhythmic waves. "Previous observers," he said. "What was their psychological state upon exit?" Reyes hesitated, and in that pause, Kovic heard everything she didn't say. "Varied," she finally answered. Dr. Morrison from Site 19 spent 4 hours inside and emerged catatonic, remained nonverbal for 6 weeks. Agent Pack from MTF Eta 10 was inside for 18 minutes and exited laughing. She submitted her resignation the same day. "Dr. Chen." "I read the file," Kovic interrupted, though he hadn't, not completely. There were gaps in the documentation, redactions that suggested the previous ethics committee reviewer had deemed certain details too dangerous for general circulation. He wondered what they had seen, what they had learned about themselves that they couldn't bear to share. The entrance was a simple glass door, incongruous against the building's deteriorating concrete. Through it, Kovic could see soft lighting, the gleam of polished floors. It looked like any upscale museum, the kind that housed old masters and charged €30 for admission. He thought of the Kunsthistorisches Museum where he had taken his daughter on her 7th birthday, before the divorce, before the Foundation had consumed his life so completely, there was nothing left for anyone else. "Standard protocol," Reyes said, fitting a subvocal microphone against his throat. "Maintain continuous narration of your observations. We'll be monitoring from out here, though previous experience suggests communication may become difficult once you're inside. If you need immediate extraction..." "I know the procedure," Reyes nodded, stepping back. The other agents watched from their positions, faces obscured by tactical gear. Kovic wondered how many times they had done this, standing guard while someone walked into their own psyche made manifest. He wondered if they envied the observers or pitied them. The door opened at his touch, soundless and smooth. Kovic stepped inside. The first thing that struck him was the smell. A combination of furniture polish, climate-controlled air, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Old paper, perhaps. Or the peculiar scent of preserved things, removed from time and decay. The entrance hall stretched before him, walls painted in warm cream tones, track lighting casting pools of illumination across the hardwood floor. Directly ahead, a brass plaque mounted on a marble pedestal bore elegant engraving, "The Museum of Aleksandar Kovic, a retrospective of possibilities." His footsteps echoed as he walked deeper inside. The first gallery opened to his left, a spacious room with exhibits arranged in chronological order, or so the small descriptive card suggested. He paused before a glass case containing a child's violin, the wood dark with age and careful use. The placard read, "The Kovic who became a virtuoso, age 9 to 34. He stared at the instrument, remembering his mother's insistence on music lessons, the way his fingers had fumbled across the strings during those first painful months of practice. He had quit at age 10, choosing football instead, choosing the approval of his father over the artistic ambitions his mother had harbored. In some other life, he had continued. In some other life, this violin had been played in concert halls, had produced beauty instead of gathering dust in a theoretical attic. "First exhibit encountered," he murmured, his voice activating the subvocal mic. "Personal artifact with biographical notation. No apparent threat." He moved on. The gallery contained dozens of cases, each one a window into a life he hadn't lived. There was a wedding photograph showing him with a woman he didn't recognize, her smile radiant, his own face younger and somehow softer than he remembered ever being. The Kovic who married his college sweetheart. There was a military medal, bronze and heavy, commemorating valor in some conflict he had never fought. The Kovic who served. A medical degree from Charles University, dated 5 years before he had actually completed his doctorate in bioethics. The Kovic who healed. Each exhibit was immaculately maintained, the glass spotless, the lighting positioned to highlight every detail. Whoever curated this space, whatever intelligence designed it, had taken great care with presentation. Kovic felt a strange detachment as he moved from case to case, as if he were viewing artifacts from a stranger's life rather than his own unmade choices. The psychological distance was a defense mechanism, he recognized, his mind protecting itself from the weight of all these divergent paths. The second gallery was larger, its ceiling vaulted and decorated with subtle molding. Here the exhibits became more abstract, more symbolic. A bronze sculpture dominated the center of the room, 8 feet tall and magnificent in its detail. Kovic circled it slowly, taking in the heroic proportions, the figure's outstretched hand holding what appeared to be a glowing sphere. The placard at its base was larger than the others, the text more elaborate, "The Kovic who saved the world." "Major exhibit," he reported, his voice tight. "Sculptural representation, appears to depict a version of myself in some kind of heroic context. No additional information provided." But that wasn't quite true. As he studied the statue more carefully, he noticed details that told a story. The figure's other hand bore scars, rendered in careful bronze, the marks of sacrifice. The face, while idealized, carried lines of exhaustion, of cost. Whatever this Kovic had done to earn such commemoration, it had not come easily. It had not come without pain. He thought of his work with the ethics committee, the decisions he had made, the protocols he had approved. How many lives had those decisions affected? How many people had suffered or been saved because of recommendations he had written in sterile office light, trying to balance impossible equations of harm and necessity? In some timeline, apparently, he had tipped those scales decisively toward salvation. In this one, he went home each night to an empty apartment and wondered if he had made any difference at all. The third gallery was darker, the lighting more subdued. Kovic felt the shift in atmosphere immediately, a heaviness in the air that made his breath come slower. There were fewer exhibits here, each one given more space, more emphasis. He approached the first with growing dread, though he couldn't have said why. It was an urn, small, ceramic, covered in a fine layer of dust that seemed impossible given the pristine condition of everything else in the museum. The placard read simply, "The Kovic who died at 6. He stood before it for a long time, staring at the vessel that contained the ashes of a child who had been him, who had almost been him. What had happened in that timeline? An accident? An illness? Some random cruelty of chance that had cut short a life before it had barely begun? His parents had never spoken of any close calls in his childhood, no near misses with death. But perhaps in that other world, the danger had been different. The circumstances aligned in just such a way that luck had failed. "Exhibit depicting early mortality," he said, his voice rough. No additional context provided. Moving on. But moving on felt like abandonment, like leaving that child behind in the dark. Kovic forced himself to turn away, to continue deeper into the gallery. The next exhibits were similar in tone. The Kovic who lost everything in the fire. The Kovic who never woke up. The Kovic who disappeared. Each one a tragedy, a life cut short or destroyed by circumstance. Each one a reminder of how fragile the thread of existence truly was, how many ways a person could be unmade. The gallery ended at a pair of heavy doors, dark wood bound with brass fixtures. A sign above them, elegant script on polished metal, read, Hall of Divergence. Below, in smaller text, viewer discretion advised. Kovic paused, his hand on the door handle. The metal was cold against his palm. Behind him, the gallery of tragedies waited in silence, urging him forward or warning him back. He couldn't tell which. He thought about Agent Pack, who had laughed as she exited, who had resigned the same day. He thought about Dr. Morrison's 6 weeks of catatonic silence. He thought about turning around, walking back through those pristine galleries and out into the Prague morning, filing a report that said he had seen enough, learned enough, that further investigation was unnecessary. He pushed the door open. The Hall of Divergence was vast, stretching away into a distance that seemed impossible given the building's external dimensions. The lighting here was clinical, bright and white, the kind used in laboratories and morgues. Exhibits lined both walls, but these were not simple cases or pedestals. These were chambers, floor-to-ceiling enclosures of reinforced glass containing full-scale dioramas, containing bodies. The first one stopped him in his tracks. Behind thick glass, suspended in a standing position by nearly invisible wires, was a figure that had once been human. Once been him. The skin had been flayed in sections, revealing layers of muscle that had been replaced with something else, something that glistened wetly under the lights. The face was recognizable as his own, but the mouth had been opened too wide, the jaw restructured to accommodate rows of teeth that belonged to no earthly creature. The eyes were his eyes, green-gray and familiar, but they stared with an expression of ecstatic horror that made his stomach turn. The placard read, "The Kovic who joined the flesh cult." "Jesus," Kovic whispered, forgetting protocol, forgetting the microphone. He stepped closer despite himself, drawn by the same morbid fascination that made people slow down at accident sites. The figure's hands had been modified, fingers elongated and tipped with bone protrusions. Across the chest, carved or grown into the transformed flesh, were symbols he recognized from classified documents. Sarkic imagery. The marks of those who worship transformation, who viewed the human form as merely a starting point for something greater, something terrible. In that timeline, he had fallen into their embrace. Had he been captured? Converted? Had he gone willingly, seeking answers to questions he shouldn't have asked? The exhibit provided no context, only the end result, a version of himself remade into something that wore humanity like an ill-fitting costume. "Hall of Divergence entered," he reported, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Exhibits here depict extreme divergent outcomes. First specimen shows evidence of sarkic modification, appears to be taxidermy or similar preservation method. Recommend full documentation team for follow-up investigation." He moved to the next chamber, though part of him screamed to run, to get out while he still could. The second figure was worse somehow, despite being less overtly modified. This Kovic stood in what appeared to be a hospital room, frozen mid-step, one hand reaching toward the glass as if trying to escape. The skin was covered in lesions, dark patches that seemed to move slightly in the light, though that had to be an optical illusion. The eyes were clouded, filmed over with something gray and viscous. The mouth hung open in a silent scream, the Kovic who was patient zero. The implications hit him like a physical blow. Patient zero. The first victim of some outbreak, some contagion that had presumably spread from this version of himself to others. How many had died in that timeline? Hundreds? Thousands? Had that world's foundation managed to contain it? Or had this Kovic's infection been the end of everything? The figure's reaching hand suggested desperation, a final attempt at escape or warning. The clouded eyes suggested there had been no escape, no cure, only the slow dissolution of self as the disease consumed everything he had been. Kovic backed away from the glass, his heart hammering. The subvocal mic picked up his rapid breathing, transmitted it to the team outside. He wondered what they were thinking, whether they were preparing to extract him, whether they could extract him if this place decided he shouldn't leave. The hall continued, and he forced himself to keep walking. Each exhibit was a nightmare variation, a version of himself twisted by circumstance or choice into something monstrous. The Kovic who opened the wrong door, his body partially phased into a wall, face frozen in eternal agony. The Kovic who made the deal, eyes replaced by empty sockets from which something dark and liquid seeped endlessly. The Kovic who understood too much, skull opened to reveal a brain that had crystallized into geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Some of the exhibits came with additional materials. Beside the Kovic who became the predator was a collection of photographs showing crime scenes, each one more gruesome than the last. The figure itself was preserved in mid-lunge, hands curved into claws, teeth filed to points, expression caught between humanity and something far more primal. Beside the Kovic who drowned the world was a series of water-damaged documents, incident reports describing floods that had consumed cities, continents, all traced back to a single man's obsession with an aquatic deity whose name was redacted even here. "This is wrong," Kovic said aloud, no longer caring about protocol. "This is all wrong. These aren't divergent timelines. These are accusations. This is showing me everything I could have become, everything terrible I could have done or been." The hall didn't respond. The exhibits waited in their glass prisons, silent and still, except for the occasional trick of the light that made them seem to shift, to breathe, to watch him pass with dead eyes that had once been his own. He thought about leaving again, but the entrance was far behind him now, and the hall stretched forward with no end in sight. Besides, some part of him needed to see this through, needed to understand what message this place was trying to convey. The Museum of Aleksandar Kovic, a retrospective of possibilities. But why these possibilities? Why show him the virtuoso and the hero only to drown him in horrors? What was the point of this psychological torture? The exhibits became more abstract as he continued. The Kovic who lost his name showed only a blank mannequin, featureless and smooth, with his identification badge pinned to its chest. The Kovic who became the breach was an empty chamber, filled with swirling mist, a placard the only indication that something had once been there. The Kovic who remembered nothing was a figure slumped in a chair, head in hands, surrounded by thousands of photographs of a life he couldn't recall living. Kovic had lost track of how long he had been walking when he finally saw it. The end of the hall. A final exhibit, set apart from the others, elevated on a raised platform and bathed in spotlight. As he drew closer, his footsteps slowing, he felt a creeping certainty that this was what the entire museum had been building toward. This was the point, the revelation, the terrible truth that the Museum of Aleksandar Kovic wanted him to understand. The platform was empty, no glass chamber, no preserved figure, no diorama or artifact or symbolic representation. Just a simple pedestal, waist-high and made of dark marble, polished to a mirror shine. On top of it sat a brass placard, identical in style to all the others he had seen. Kovic approached slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, as if he were wading through water, through time itself. The placard read, "The Kovic who stayed." He stared at the words, trying to process their meaning. The Kovic who stayed. Stayed where? In the museum? In this moment? He looked down at the polished marble of the pedestal and saw his own reflection looking back, distorted and dark. In the reflection, his face seemed older, more tired, as if the past hour had aged him years. Behind him, he heard a sound that turned his blood to ice, the sharp, crystalline crack of breaking glass. He spun around, and his mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. In the nearest chamber, the one containing the Kovic who made the deal, a spiderweb of fractures was spreading across the reinforced glass. As he watched, another crack appeared, then another, the sound echoing through the hall like gunfire. The figure inside remained motionless, but something about its posture had changed, a tension that hadn't been there before, as if it were preparing to move. Further down the hall, another crack, then another. The sound multiplied, overlapping, becoming a chorus of shattering glass that filled the space with terrible music. The Kovic who joined the flesh cult. The Kovic who was patient zero. The Kovic who became the predator. One by one, their chambers were breaking open, the glass that had held them in their frozen tableaus giving way. Kovic ran. He sprinted back down the hall, past the breaking exhibits, their preservation failing as he passed. In his peripheral vision, he caught movement, the figures beginning to stir, to turn toward him with whatever passed for awareness in their preserved states. The Kovic who understood too much tilted its crystalline brain toward him, geometric patterns shifting. The Kovic who opened the wrong door pulled itself free from the wall with a sound like tearing meat. The Kovic who drowned the world reached out with hands that dripped with impossible water. The subvocal mic was picking up his panicked breathing, his incoherent attempts to describe what was happening. Behind him, he heard footsteps, multiple sets of them, some shuffling, some running, some making sounds that feet shouldn't make. His alternate selves freed from their exhibits, pursuing him down the hall, coming to claim the empty pedestal. Coming to claim the place marked for the Kovic who stayed. The entrance to the Hall of Divergence seemed impossibly far away, the distance stretching like taffy, like a nightmare where you run and run but never move forward. Kovic's lungs burned, his legs ached, but terror drove him on. He didn't dare look back, didn't want to see how close they were, didn't want to know which version of himself would reach him first. The doors appeared ahead, and he hit them at full speed, slamming through into the gallery of tragedies. The urn of the Kovic who died at 6 had fallen from its display, shattered across the floor, dust scattering in his wake. The placard for the Kovic who never woke up was swinging on its mount, as if something had just passed by. The entire museum was coming apart, the careful curation failing, the exhibits breaking free. Through the next gallery, past the bronze statue that now seemed to watch him with judgment in its metallic eyes. The Kovic who saved the world, standing eternal, while the Kovic who had done nothing but observe ran for his life from his own possibilities made manifest. The wedding photograph was cracked, the glass splintered, the violin case was open, empty, the medical degree was torn from its frame. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Voices, some of them, though they spoke in languages he didn't recognize or made sounds that weren't quite words. The wet slap of modified flesh against polished floors, the scrape of bone protrusions on wood, the splash of water that shouldn't exist. They were all coming, every terrible version of himself, every nightmare possibility, converging on the one version that had dared to observe them, to witness their existence. The entrance hall, the brass plaque announcing his name, his retrospective. The glass door showing the Prague morning beyond, gray and real and blessed with the mundane solidity of the actual world. Kovic reached for the handle, his hand shaking so badly he could barely grip it. The door didn't open. He pulled harder, panic flooding through him. Through the glass he could see Agent Reyes and the tactical team, see them moving toward the door, responding to his obvious distress. But the door remained sealed, as if it had become part of the wall, as if the museum had decided he couldn't leave, that he belonged here, that his place was on the empty pedestal in the Hall of Divergence. The footsteps behind him stopped. Kovic turned slowly, pressing his back against the unyielding door. They had all gathered in the entrance hall, every version of himself that the museum had preserved, the heroic and the tragic, the modified and the diseased, the lost and the transformed. They stood in a semicircle, watching him with eyes that were his eyes, wearing faces that were his face, twisted by circumstance and choice into 100 different configurations of what Alexander Kovic could have been. The Kovic who saved the world stood at the center, no longer bronze but flesh, somehow animated from its sculptural form. It spoke, and its voice was his voice, tired and sad and infinitely understanding. "You think you're different," it said. "You think you're the real one, the one who matters. But you're just another exhibit, another possibility, the Kovic who stayed and watched while we did the living." "This isn't real," Kovic said, his voice breaking. "You're not real. This is a psychological attack, a mimetic hazard, some kind of... We're exactly as real as you are. said the Kovic who joined the flesh cult, its restructured mouth forming words with difficulty. We're all made of the same choices, just arranged differently. We're all paths through the same forest. The question, said the Kovic who was patient zero, clouded eyes somehow focusing on him, is which of us deserves to exist? Which version of Alexander Kovic gets to walk out that door and return to the world? The circle began to close. They moved toward him slowly, inexorably, and Kovic had nowhere to go, no escape route, no protocol for this scenario. His back was pressed against the glass, his mind racing through 17 years of Foundation experience, searching for some procedure, some technique that would save him. The Kovic who understood too much reached him first, its crystalline brain pulsing with inner light. It placed a hand on his shoulder, and Kovic felt something shift inside his mind, as if the contact had opened a door to understanding he had kept carefully locked. Knowledge flooded through him, terrible and vast and complete. He saw the museum for what it truly was. Not a place, but a moment. The instant of quantum superposition when all possibilities existed simultaneously, before reality chose one path over all others. He saw himself reflected infinitely, every choice branching into new choices, every moment spawning 1,000 variations of what could be. And he understood that the museum didn't want to hurt him. It wanted to show him the truth, that there was no real Kovic, no prime timeline, no version that mattered more than any other. There was only this moment, this choice, this impossible convergence of all the paths he could have walked. The other versions of himself pressed closer, and Kovic felt them merging, not physically but conceptually, their experiences and memories flowing into him like water into a vessel. He remembered being 6 years old and not waking up. He remembered joining the flesh cult and feeling his body transform into something transcendent. He remembered standing before the world with a glowing sphere in his hand, knowing he had saved everything and that it had cost him everything. He remembered opening the wrong door, making the deal, becoming the predator, drowning the world, losing his name, forgetting everything, understanding too much. He was all of them. He had always been all of them. The museum hadn't shown him alternate lives. It had shown him the truth of his own existence, the quantum nature of identity itself. The glass door opened behind him, and Kovic stumbled backward into the Prague morning. Agent Reyes caught him, her face tight with concern. The tactical team surrounded them, weapons drawn, though there was nothing to shoot at. Through the doorway, Kovic could see the entrance hall, empty and pristine, no sign of the exhibits or the terrible convergence that had just occurred. Dr. Kovic, Reyes was saying, her voice seeming to come from very far away. Dr. Kovic, can you hear me? You were inside for 6 hours. We were about to breach when the door opened. Are you injured? Did anything touch you? 6 hours. It had felt like minutes. It had felt like years. Kovic looked down at his hands, half expecting to see them modified, transformed, crystallized. But they looked normal, the same hands he had always had. He touched his face, feeling the familiar contours, the same features he saw in the mirror every morning. But something had changed. Behind his eyes, in the depths of his mind, he carried all of them now. Every version of himself, every possibility, every path not taken. They were quiet, dormant, but present, watching, waiting. I'm fine, he heard himself say, though he wasn't sure which version of himself was speaking. I need to file a report. They took him to a temporary command center set up in one of the Foundation vehicles. Kovic sat at a small desk, a laptop open before him, and tried to find words for what he had experienced. The cursor blinked on the empty page, patient and expectant. Around him, agents moved with efficient purpose, coordinating the aftermath of the manifestation event, preparing to seal and monitor the site. His fingers moved across the keyboard, typing words that felt both true and inadequate. SCP-3654 manifested at 3:32 hours in Prague, Czech Republic. Observer entered at 04:15 hours and remained inside for approximately 6 hours. The anomaly presents as a high-end museum containing exhibits related to the observer's alternate life paths, displayed with increasing psychological intensity. Initial galleries show benign or positive divergent outcomes. Later sections, particularly the so-called Hall of Divergence, depict disturbing transformations and catastrophic scenarios. The manifestation culminates in a confrontation between the observer and animated versions of exhibited alternate selves. The psychological impact is severe and appears to involve a form of identity dissolution or quantum awareness. He paused, reading over what he had written. It was accurate, clinical, exactly the kind of report the Foundation expected. It was also completely insufficient to convey what had actually happened, what he had learned about the nature of self and choice, and the infinite branching paths of existence. Recommendation, he continued typing, that future observations be conducted with extreme caution. SCP-3654 does not cause physical harm, but its effects on the observer's sense of identity and reality may be profound and potentially permanent. Further study needed to determine if changes to observer psychology represent a mimetic hazard or genuine ontological revelation. Ontological revelation. That was what he had experienced, wasn't it? Not a trick or an attack, but a revelation. The museum had shown him the truth, and now he had to live with that truth, carry it forward into whatever came next. Agent Reyes appeared at his shoulder, reading over his preliminary report. Dr. Kovic, she said carefully, the psychological evaluation team is ready for you. Standard post-exposure protocol. They'll want to run some tests, make sure you're... I'm fine, he said again, and this time he almost believed it. I know what the protocol is. I helped write it. But had he? Or had that been a different Kovic, in a different timeline, making different choices? Did it matter? They were all him, all the same person, experiencing infinite variations of the same life. He submitted the report and stood, letting Reyes guide him toward the medical vehicle. Through the window, he could see the condemned building, its facade ordinary and unremarkable in the morning light. There was no sign of the museum inside, no indication that anything anomalous had occurred. SCP-3654 had disappeared as spontaneously as it had manifested, leaving only memories and questions in its wake. The psychological evaluation took 3 hours. Kovic answered their questions truthfully, described his experiences in detail, allowed them to run their tests and make their assessments. The evaluator, a Dr. Sarah Chen from Site 19, made careful notes and maintained a professionally neutral expression throughout. Dr. Kovic, she finally said, setting down her tablet, I'm going to recommend a 2-week mandatory leave and follow-up evaluations. What you experienced was significant, and the ethics committee needs you functioning at full capacity. This isn't a punishment or a reflection on your fitness for duty. It's standard protocol for this type of exposure. I understand, Kovic said, and he did. He would have made the same recommendation himself, in her position. Will I be cleared to return to active duty after the 2 weeks? Dr. Chen hesitated. That depends on how the follow-up evaluations go. Dr. Kovic, you experienced something that very few people have encountered and survived with their sanity intact. The fact that you're sitting here having this conversation is remarkable. But I need to be honest with you. The long-term effects of SCP-3654 exposure are not fully understood. Some observers have reported persistent dissociation, identity confusion, difficulty making decisions because they're too aware of alternate outcomes. Others have shown remarkable resilience and even improved psychological integration. We'll monitor your progress and make determinations as we go. Kovic nodded, accepting her assessment. In his mind, he felt the others stirring, the alternate Kovics that he now carried with him. The one who had saved the world offered strength. The one who had died at 6 offered humility. Even the terrible ones, the transformed and diseased and monstrous versions, offered their own twisted wisdom. He was more than he had been before entering the museum. Whether that made him better or simply different remained to be seen. They released him that evening with instructions to report to Site 19 for follow-up in 14 days. A Foundation driver took him to his apartment in Prague, a small space he maintained for when his work brought him to the region. Kovic stood in the doorway, looking at the familiar furniture, the books on their shelves, the life he had built for himself through decades of careful choices. On the empty pedestal in the Hall of Divergence, a placard had read, "The Kovic Who Stayed." He had thought it meant staying in the museum, becoming another exhibit, another preserved possibility. But now, standing in his apartment, he wondered if it meant something else, staying in this life. This timeline, this version of himself, despite now knowing all the other versions he could have been. Kovic set down his briefcase and went to the window, looking out over Prague's nighttime skyline. Somewhere in the city, in a condemned building in Smíchov, the Museum of Alexander Kovic had existed for 6 hours before disappearing back into whatever quantum foam had spawned it. The exhibits were gone, the halls empty, the carefully curated retrospective of his possibilities erased from reality, but not from his memory. Never from his memory. He would file supplementary reports in the coming days as the full implications of his experience became clear. He would undergo the evaluations, accept the leave, prove himself fit to return to duty. He would continue his work with the Ethics Committee, making recommendations about anomalies and containment and the impossible choices the Foundation faced every day. And he would do it all while carrying the weight of infinite possibilities, the knowledge of every path he could have walked, every version of himself he could have become. In some timeline, he had saved the world. In another, he had ended it. In countless others, he had lived and died in ways both mundane and extraordinary. But in this timeline, in this moment, he was simply Dr. Alexander Kovic, Ethics Committee member, observer of SCP-3654, the man who had seen himself reflected in infinite variation and chosen to remain himself despite it all. The Kovic who stayed. He understood now. That was the horror and the gift the museum had offered. Not the revelation of what he could have been, but the weight of choosing to be who he was. Every moment was a choice. Every choice eliminated infinite possibilities, and he would spend the rest of his life aware of that fact, unable to ever forget the paths not taken. Kovic closed the curtains and turned away from the window. Tomorrow he would begin processing what had happened. Tonight, he would sleep and dream of pristine galleries filled with versions of himself, all watching, all waiting, all wondering which of them was real and whether it mattered. The museum had closed. The exhibits were gone. But the questions remained, and they would haunt him until the day he died, whichever version of that death eventually found him, in whichever timeline finally claimed him as its own.